My name is Helena Martins, I'm 54 years old, and for 28 years I was married to Daniel, the love of my life. 6 months ago, I buried him after he died from a sudden brain aneurysm during his morning walk. There was no goodbye, no last conversation. That morning, he kissed my forehead and said, "I love you, Lena," as he always did, and walked out the door. I never saw him alive again. The funeral was on a rainy Saturday. Lucas and Amanda, our 2 children, were devastated. I moved through everything on autopilot, choosing the coffin, the flowers, the clothes he would wear for the last time. I watched as they lowered the casket and covered the grave, yet part of me still couldn't believe he was gone. The first months were the worst. The house felt enormous and too silent. I kept his clothes in the closet, his toothbrush in the bathroom, his history books piled on the nightstand. I returned to work after a month at the medical office where I worked as a secretary, needing routine to remind me that life continued. 6 months passed this way, 6 months of learning to exist without him. Then, on a Tuesday in September, I saw him. It was late afternoon at the neighborhood market. I was in the dairy aisle when I noticed a man a few meters ahead. He was facing away, but something about him made me stop. The height, the posture, the way he tilted his head slightly to the right when concentrating. My heart began racing. He turned slightly, reaching for a carton of milk, and I saw his profile, the nose, the jawline, the birthmark on the left side of his neck, a dark spot the size of a small coin. I dropped my basket. It was Daniel. It had to be. No one else had that birthmark in exactly that place, that same facial structure, that same way of moving. He started walking toward the checkout. Without thinking, I followed him. My mind screamed that this was impossible. I had buried my husband 6 months ago, had seen his body in the casket, but my feet kept moving, following this man who couldn't be Daniel, but was. I followed him outside. He crossed the street, walked 2 blocks, and entered an old apartment building. I stood on the opposite sidewalk, staring at the door, trying to understand what had just happened. When Lucas called that night, I asked without thinking, "Are you sure your father died?" After a long silence and his concern, I told him I'd seen someone identical to his father. Lucas suggested I might need to talk to a psychologist, that seeing people who remind us of those we've lost is normal in grief. But I knew this was different. The next day, I returned to the building and waited. After 2 hours, he emerged. Same height, same posture, same face. I followed and called out, "Daniel." He turned, removing his sunglasses, and there was my husband's face, the same brown eyes, thick eyebrows, the small scar above his upper lip from a childhood bicycle fall. "I'm sorry," he said, frowning. "I think you're confusing me with someone else. My name isn't Daniel, it's Andre. Andre Costa." I insisted, mentioning the birthmark, the scar, everything. He said he'd never been married, had only lived in the neighborhood for 2 months. Despite my protests, he walked away, leaving me standing on the sidewalk, shaking. Over the following days, I returned to observe him repeatedly. I researched identical people, doppelgangers, learning about cases of unrelated people who looked identical. But this wasn't just appearance, it was everything: the walk, the voice, the exact birthmark. When Amanda noticed something was wrong during a visit, I couldn't tell her. She would think I was having a breakdown. Instead, I decided to investigate. I searched for Andre Costa online but found nothing. Then I had an idea about accessing the building. One day, I entered and climbed to the 3rd floor where I'd seen his lit window. As I stood in the hallway, I heard footsteps. It was him. When he saw me, alarm crossed his face. He threatened to call the police if I didn't stop following him. "Please," I begged. "Just give me 5 minutes to show you something." Hesitantly, he agreed to 5 minutes in the hallway. I showed him a photo of Daniel from our 20th wedding anniversary. Andre looked at it and his face changed, the color drained from his cheeks. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice strangely hoarse. "That's my husband, Daniel. He died 6 months ago." Andre continued staring at the photo, his hands trembling slightly. "This is impossible," he murmured. He quickly left, clearly shaken by what he'd seen. The next day, I followed him to his workplace, a small architectural office. When I appeared, he was angry about the harassment but also confused and afraid. I pressed him about his origins. He said his parents died when he was a child, that he was raised by an aunt, and had recently moved here after a complicated divorce. I asked if he was adopted. He said no, at least not that he knew of. I suggested he and Daniel might be brothers, perhaps twins separated at birth. Though it sounded like a soap opera plot, I convinced him to check old photos at his aunt's house. That weekend, Andre contacted me. He'd found old photos and something shocking, an original birth certificate showing, father not declared, different from the certificate in his current documents that listed João Silva as his father. We met at a cafe. When I showed him Daniel's birth certificate, the dates were significant. Daniel was born August 12, 1970, and Andre on August 14, according to his certificate. We both realized something was deeply wrong. Andre called his aunt immediately. Through a tense conversation, he discovered the truth: he was adopted. His mother Clarice couldn't have children, so she and João adopted him as a newborn through an informal, rushed adoption in 1970. His aunt had promised to keep it secret. But she didn't know his biological origins. I suggested we visit Beatriz, Daniel's cousin, who mentioned a midwife named Dona Rosa who had assisted at Daniel's birth. We drove 3 hours to find her. Dona Rosa, now 93, remembered the birth clearly. When she saw Andre, she recognized him immediately. Then she revealed the devastating truth. Mariana, Daniel's mother, had given birth to twin boys. The delivery was difficult, she lost a lot of blood and doctors feared she wouldn't survive. Her husband Antonio was desperate, facing possibly 2 babies and a dying wife. In those days, there were intermediaries who solved problems. In his desperation, Antonio sold one of the babies. The adoption was arranged quickly for good money to a couple from another state who couldn't have children. When Mariana recovered, they told her one baby had died at birth. She cried and grieved but believed it. Daniel grew up never knowing he had a twin brother. Antonio kept the secret until he died. Andre was devastated. "My biological father sold me like an object," he said, his voice breaking. We sat on the curb outside Dona Rosa's house, processing the weight of this revelation. On the drive back, Andre asked to know everything about Daniel, who he was, what he liked, if he was happy. I told him about Daniel's kindness, his love of teaching history, his morning walks, his terrible singing in the shower. Andre recognized similarities. He also took morning walks, needed that solitary time before starting his day. Even their coffee preferences were identical. At my house, I showed Andre hundreds of photos spanning Daniel's life. We sat surrounded by albums late into the night, ordering pizza, as Andre studied every image of the brother he never knew. I decided to tell Lucas and Amanda. Lucas was shocked and skeptical but wanted to meet Andre. Amanda was curious. That Saturday, I prepared lunch for 4. When Andre arrived, the moment Lucas and Amanda saw him was profound. "My God, it's Dad," Amanda whispered. "No," Lucas said, voice trembling. "It's not, but..." The meal was awkward at first, but gradually they relaxed. Amanda noticed Andre smiled like Daniel, left side first, then right. Lucas observed he scratched his eyebrow when thinking, just like their father. They saw the undeniable genetic connections. Over the following weeks and months, Andre became part of our lives. He came for dinner weekly. Lucas invited him to watch football. Amanda introduced him to her boyfriend. I began seeing Andre not as a painful reminder of Daniel, but as his own person. One evening after dinner, while washing dishes together, Andre confessed he'd been having strange dreams, places he'd never been, people he'd never met, but somehow familiar. "Maybe they're Daniel's memories," he said. Months passed. Autumn turned to winter. Andre became family so naturally it was hard to remember a time without him. Lucas asked him to be godfather to his expected child. Amanda sought his career advice. And I began depending on his presence in ways I hadn't expected. One Friday evening, after Lucas and Amanda had left, Andre suddenly spoke. "Helena, I've developed feelings for you. Not as a substitute for my brother or because of confusion about Daniel, but for you, for who you are." I was stunned. "I don't know what I feel," I admitted. "There are moments I look at you and see Daniel. And moments I see just you. Both confuse me. But I can't deny there's something, a connection. So what do we do? He asked. Maybe nothing for now. Maybe we just continue as we are, letting things evolve naturally. On the anniversary of Daniel's death, we all visited the cemetery, Lucas, Amanda, Andre, and me. When it was my turn, I knelt before the headstone. Hi, my love. I brought someone to meet you. Your brother, Andre. He's a good person. You would like him. I touched the stone. I love you. I always will. But I'm also learning to live again. And I hope you understand. When we returned home, we sat on the porch watching the sunset. Andre thanked me for letting him be part of the grief, the memory, the family. You were always part of this, I said. From the moment you were born. We just didn't know. My life would never be the same. Daniel was dead, and nothing would change that. But I found something in the midst of my pain, purpose, connection, truth, and perhaps one day, love again. Not to replace what I lost, but to complement who I'd become. I buried my husband 6 months ago, but I saw him in the supermarket. What I discovered changed everything. I learned that families are more complex than we imagine, that secrets can survive generations, that love can manifest in the strangest ways, and that even in the midst of the greatest pain, we can still find light. Life continues. Even when we think it's over, it continues. And it's up to us to decide what to do with the days we're given. I chose to live, to seek the truth, to embrace the unexpected connections that fate placed in my path. And I don't regret it.